For almost 10 years now, Fujifilm has had a line of cameras that I feel not enough people talk about, the XA line. The XA line was introduced in 2013 with the Fujifilm XA-2, and it was their entry-level mirrorless camera. With a price tag of $599 and a 16 megapixel sensor, it quickly earned the name Giant Killer. I have a much more personal relationship with these cameras, however, as the Fujifilm XA-2 was the very first camera that I ever owned, and I used it as my only camera for over a year. Today, I want to talk about my time with these cameras and whether or not they're something that you should consider buying today. Now I have two Fujifilm cameras in front of me right now, the Fujifilm XA-5 and the Fujifilm XA-2. Let's start by talking about the XA-2. I don't think it can be overstated just how small this camera is, especially when you combine that with Fuji's large line of compact, sharp lenses to go along with it. Like this, the 23mm f2 WR for weather-resistant lens. This lens plus this camera are small enough that they could easily go in my jacket pocket. Another thing I love is the build and feel of this camera. It is a plastic camera, but the top and bottom have this faux metal on that gives a nice cooling feeling to the touch, and I quite like it. That alongside all of the dials on the top of the camera, they give a nice satisfying click with each rotation, and they feel a lot better than some of the other more budget options out there. But more important than the feel of the camera, of course, is going to be the images that it can produce. And I thankfully don't think you're going to be disappointed when it comes to this camera for the images. The XA-2 features the same 16 megapixel bare sensor that the Fujifilm XA-1 did all the way back in 2013. Now this is subjective, mind you, but I've always really liked the JPEGs that come out of this camera, featuring those staple Fuji colors. But where I really think that this camera shines is just in a type of camera that you can use to walk around and take pictures with. This is a camera that I think really is going up against that Fuji X100V area, where it's a camera that you can use to just walk around with, take photos, and be in the moment. And again, with its small form factor, I think that that works amazing for this camera. And as well, if later down the line you do decide that you want to upgrade to one of Fuji's newer cameras like the X-T4, X-T5, or X Pro series, anything like that, well thankfully they all have that same lens mount, so you can take all of your lenses that you've built up for this camera and move them over to that newer series. Speaking of upgrades, the Fujifilm XA-5. This camera takes everything that I like about the XA-2 and improves it. Simply put, this is a better camera. It has a new and improved screen, which is also a touch screen now, which is kinda neat. It also has a 24 megapixel sensor compared to the old one 16 megapixel sensor. Not a huge difference, but with that sensor you are also getting a new autofocus system, which for this camera makes a huge difference over this one. And all the while still keeping the overall design of the two, still making it an incredible thing for travel or anything like that where you just want a portable camera, but also giving it that better autofocusing system to make it easier to do things like street photography or just point and shoot, things like that. So really, it's just better. It takes the portability and the image quality of the two and elevates it to another level, all the while really costing about the same. And as I mentioned before, I think that makes this an incredibly tempting offer in a world where the Fujifilm X100V is sold out nearly everywhere. You can pick up something like this for way cheaper, and you can actually find one. That's not to say that both of these cameras are sunshine and rainbows. There are things that I don't like about them. Let's start with the 2. The 2 does not have good autofocus. The 5 improves upon it, but neither of them really shine in this category. And I would go as far as to say that that makes it so certain types of lenses I simply would not use with it. For instance, the Viltrox 85mm 1.8 lens. This lens is not very good at autofocusing on its own. And then when you combine it with a camera like this, the XA-2, it makes it a very painful experience, missing shots that I would think would be easier to autofocus on, and it just doesn't hit it consistently. And while we're on the topic of this lens, I would also say something that you should avoid with both of these cameras is getting big lenses. The best part about these cameras, like I was saying, was their portability and ease of use. When you change that to a lens like this, it makes it so to take any kind of a steady shot, you're going to have to be holding it with both hands, and also you're going to have to put this camera and the lens in a bag, and I really do think that that defeats a lot of the purpose of these cameras. I mean, sure, the images that you can get with it, they're still nice, so if you really want to, you could still go out, get this 85mm lens. It's a wide open aperture, so they'd be bright, nice photos. I just wouldn't recommend it. But thankfully, Fujifilm does still offer a very, very large variety of those small, sharp lenses like I was mentioning before. So I don't think it's a huge deal, just something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind with both of these cameras is that I don't think they do very good when it comes to low light. The A2 has a max ISO of 6400, and I really wouldn't recommend going over 1600 or 3200 at the most. The shots just start to look real grainy after that. Couple that with neither of these cameras having any kind of stabilization, of course, because why would they? And what you're left with is a camera that really doesn't perform very well in darkness. So if you are going to get either one of these cameras, I would definitely recommend that you pair it with a fast prime if you plan on doing any kind of night shooting or any kind of indoor shooting. Something else to keep in mind as well is I really wouldn't recommend either of these cameras to anyone who's interested in doing video. To put it simply, both of these cameras are bad video cameras, I think. Now, you'd think that with this camera having this cool flippy screen that it would be perfect for doing video or vlogging like this, but it only has 15 FPS 4K, no kind of stabilization, and it also only has a 2.5-inch mic jack in it as well, which makes it a huge pain for trying to use normal standard microphones or even lav mics without an adapter. So if you have one of these cameras and you want to take a quick video, I don't think it's going to kill anybody, but I really wouldn't recommend this. Get a Sony or Canon or something like that if you want a cheap video camera, not one of these. Another thing I'll mention with both of these cameras that I think is fairly obvious, they do not have viewfinders. Neither of them have a viewfinder on them. To me, I don't really mind that. I'm blind in my right eye, so I don't really use most viewfinders on this side anyway because obvious reasons. But if that is something that you care about, maybe look at the Fujifilm XE line or frankly any of their other cameras because they all have viewfinders. Just keep that in mind. So when you put all of that together, you're getting two cameras that I think are fantastic for travel photos and anything that you want a small lightweight camera just to walk around with, but are not very good if you are looking for heavier lenses, for good or outstanding autofocus, or any kind of video features for that matter. Now, if these were more expensive cameras, that might be a problem. However, you can find the Fujifilm XA-2 for about $270 right now with a lens. And at that price, I think it's a steal. If the Fujifilm XA-5 didn't exist. I bought my Fujifilm XA-5 for $300, and at just a $30 difference of what I bought mine for, this is a much better camera and a much better deal. The Fujifilm XA-2 has its charm, but with every kind of improvement that was made on the XA-5, I have a very hard time recommending that someone buy this camera when you can buy a much better one for just $30 more, or at least what I got mine for. Now, one thing I will mention with these is that at the time of recording, while I was able to find this camera for $270 with a lens, I was not able to find a copy of this camera on eBay on like an auction or something like that. I was only able to find one that is buy it now for $660. That is too much. When you're getting to $660, you could buy a new camera for that amount, or you could buy a used full frame camera for that amount. I don't think that that's a good idea for this camera. If you're able to find it like I did for $300 or even $400, heck, I even consider $500, maybe. Just know what you're getting into. You're getting an excellent little camera for travel photography or really any kind of stills photography, as long as it's not a fast-moving subject like sports photography or something like that. If you know that that's what you're getting and you buy this camera, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. So if you can find one for the right price, then yes, I would highly recommend this camera. It's great. It's what I started with. I think it's also wonderful really for starting off with because it's just a bit simpler. I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy because I started with it, but I really like it. So I'd recommend it. You may not like it, but this is the ideal YouTube setup. Hey, thank you so much for watching, especially if you got to this portion in the video. It means a ton to me. I can't stress it enough. This video is meant to be just a smaller portion of a larger video that I'm doing on product photography and video, so if that's something that you're interested in, then please consider subscribing and sticking around. It feels like sometimes doing anything like this that's creative, the hardest portion is just taking that first step. So I'm so glad that this video can be done. I'm taking that first step. We're giving YouTube a shot, doing all that. So if you want to stick around, but regardless, I really appreciate you for being here. God bless, have a wonderful day, and thank you.